Thanks, Alex. Welcome everyone to the October 2024 Housing Commission virtual meeting. As a reminder for folks, the chat is not supposed to be used for substantive comments or feedback or questions. If you're having a technical issue, you're welcome to use it, but it is generally for that, not for conversation or feedback during the meeting. And I think we can go ahead and start with our first item on the agenda, which is public comment. And it looks like we have one public commenter who just joined the meeting and probably didn't hear me say that. Shauna, are you there?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Alex? Okay, yes, I'm here. I'm trouble joining.
Sounds good. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Do I have to have my face on here or can I just speak
You do not.
without my face?
You are welcome to speak with your camera off.
Okay, and you said I have 3 minutes. I'm just trying to look at the clock so I'm able to see here and you'll let me know when it's okay. I'm just going to speak on our issues and that we need some assistance right now with some testing here in this building. Hi, good evening. My name is Shauna Pinkston, and this is my first meeting, and I'm just wanting to share that I am a resident here in Arlington County living with a disability. I live in a building that is managed by AHC, owned by AHC and managed by Paradigm, and there are over 77 units with about 125 residents, and quite a few of us are living with a disability. It is an ADA property. Fortunately, the program that I'm connected to, ECMV, they connected me with this new property here called The Terraces. And unfortunately, while it's a beautiful property, we are having a lot of issues that are raising some major health and safety concerns. And I'll just quickly give a share. I myself suffer from health issues. Myself and many other tenants have been reporting for months that we would like some environmental testing, some mold testing and some air quality testing, because we're having issues with the building and are reporting signs of, sickness and all, and no one is listening. We finally had someone come out today, but unfortunately, retaliation is a major fear that myself and many other tenants face. And if anyone has done their research on AHC, I'm new to Arlington, but from what I can understand, AHC is not new to being in the hot seat for having a disconnect with tenants and community and listening to the needs and concerns, especially when it comes to health and safety. And if I believe correctly, that has to do with some state and some federal laws, and they're just not listening to us. We really need someone to step in and assist the tenants here, including myself, with some air quality testing, some mold testing, and just so that we know what we are breathing. We'd like to be a good community and a healthy and safe community. And with this building only being open 15 months and counting, we should not be experiencing HVAC issues that we're concerned about and not getting any answers on. So I don't want to run on. Unfortunately, like I said, I just found out about this meeting last minute. But I've been a community advocate for a little under 2 decades. And unfortunately, this is not the first time we experienced this. When you talk about issues you're having, retaliation and concern of, being evicted or the threat of being evicted is always an issue. So thank you. And I hope someone's listening so that we can get the assistance that we need.
Thank you, Shauna. Appreciate you coming to the commission. Have you, first of all, sorry to hear about the issues that you and other tenants are facing. You said you were part of a specific program. What was the name of that program?
Sure. The name of the program is ECNV, and it stands for the acronym for Independence Northern Virginia. Senior Director is Dominique Dunford-Lack and Sherry Takamoto, and I've been with that program for a little under 2 years. I also do a lot of work here, and I just moved to Arlington from Loudon. Been here about a year, and we got right into the community. And the people here are great. But what we're experiencing from leadership, and this is just unfortunate, and you find this in a lot of places, is that they're tucking things under the rug that is a major concern for us. And when it comes to our health, we just can't do this. So ECMV is supporting me, and as a matter of fact, that's how I found out about this meeting. And we're geared up and ready to start talking to senators and Congress people if someone doesn't step in and listen.
Have you talked to county staff about the issues within CPHD?
Um, can you give me a little clarity? What you mean?
Yeah. No,
Sorry.
and the reason I ask is just like, have you talked to any Arlington County staff about the issues that you've encountered, just so I have context?
Oh, good question. So just to answer your question in short, yes. I mean, for the last 3 days, we haven't even done our volunteer work because I've been home just making calls. Environmental health, the housing department, OSHA, even we've had to reach out because again, and some of the things, let me just say this, a lot of things we're experiencing, we have documented videos or email or, pictures. For example, a big water leak. Brand new building, we just had a big water leak, and there is a concern for mold. So, we've talked to them, but like I do, these things don't happen overnight. And unfortunately, we had someone out today from Virginia Housing. As a matter of fact, I believe her name was I'm sorry, I have her card, but it's been a long day, guys. It started at 5 a.m., so I'm a little exhausted. But she was out from the Virginia Housing Department. Um, and from I was right here, and the manager kind of tried to push things under the rug, kind of tried to make us feel scared if we say too much. Didn't give us a chance to talk to the woman privately without her present. So we're in fear that there's retaliation. Now, we do have some good support here. We've got a resident manager by the name of Lydia Dixon, and she's also been met with some problems when she's trying to speak for us residents, the retaliation thing. And it's just sad. So we really need some people that are kind of, for lack of better words, above us that could step in and say, hey, this can't happen. This can't happen. At the very least, we deserve air quality slash mold testing so that we can, I mean, because you think about it, you got a great investment. You just opened this building shy of 15 months ago. You've got a great community living here. If we know that there's mold, we can target that problem, fix it, and not make a bigger problem that's going to cost us our health, people's finances and effort and energy. We fix it now. But when you're pushing it under the rug, you won't give us answers. You won't talk to us. I mean, I'm on Social Security, and I'm considering trying to pay for an environmentalist, which is, if anyone on this line knows, is upwards of starting at up at $1,800. I can't even afford that.
Yeah, and
10.
Shauna, I appreciate what you're going through, and I think especially since this is a subsidized property, the county has dealt with similar issues in the past with mainly HC, and they've been able to like either work with HC to make sure that they have environmental and mold testing, at the property and for the units where there's concern, or the county in some cases has paid for it themselves. And so I'd like to try to work with CPHE staff. So Alex, if we could do a follow-up with Shauna and try to see if we can work to resolve these issues. And um, I know in general, I keep hearing concerns about maintenance issues like at the Serrano, kind of the same issues that we've been hearing for years. Um, AHC, I think what I've heard there is that they're being responsive at the corporate level, but tenants are still feeling like the property manager is a barrier to getting things done. And that they have to escalate everything up to like the CEO of AHC if they want something to get resolved, which is incredibly frustrating, and more work than they should have to be putting in. And I've just recently heard complaints about that from advocates for the Serrano. And I think, a number of us can remember the issues at that property and what we all went through with HC in the county. So Shauna, I'm happy to take an action uh, to work with staff to follow up with you and try to meet and discuss like what, if any, actions the county may have already taken if they were aware of this. If they're not, what they can do to apply pressure or work with HC to resolve the issues. Have you talked to HC corporate or just mainly
So,
Paradigm?
so great question. I had a chance to have about an hour-long meeting via telephone with their director of compliance, Miss forgive me, it's slipping me now. But anyway, we talked for quite a long time. And when I tell you that we have had documented proof of even one of the maintenance guys here carrying around a firearm and brandishing it in front of a child, that there have been incidents going on. This is only a year. It's probably only been a year. I want you guys to understand how bad this has gotten. Again, I'm new to Arlington, but I am a great advocate and have been for 15 years. And I understand when people, and I have a disability, I have several, but it doesn't stop us from advocating for each other and knowing that we're all on the same path. And there are people who have talked about harming themselves who have called me in the middle of the night or be it, daytime and said, look, I can't take the management. You're right, Mr. Killian. If I say your name wrong, I'm sorry.
It's
The
fine.
management, paradigm management is my God, they're atrocious. And it's so bad that people, because they're feeling like no one's listening. So I read the article about AHC some years ago with that property you just mentioned. And my God, my hat's off to all you guys who stayed in with your elbows in and your knees in and doing the work, because unless you're actually experiencing it, most people can only sympathize. They can't empathize. They're not living it. But this can be a great property. And if we allow these things to go without, like you said, and I hate to use this word, but putting the fire or, kind of pushing the envelope a little behind people, then these things go on, they get worse. So again, I'm here. I'm a volunteer for ECMV. We do some community work. I'm also on a community service board here in Arlington. And while I'm new to Arlington, I'm not new to advocating for people, who are getting overlooked. So whatever you guys can do, so we can kind of end this stuff and give people the right quality of life they deserve, including my family.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you, Shauna. And the county does
yeah,
have a number of tools and many more tools than they had prior to the Serrano crisis happening. But I want to recognize Joe from the commission.
yes.
Joe, I can't hear you. But it doesn't look like you're muted. I still can't hear what you're saying. Maybe your microphone's not working or it's not hooked up. Can't hear what you're saying. Joe, if that's still an issue and you can't resolve it, you might want to try just calling in on your phone. So you can have the video here, but the audio on your phone. While we wait for while Joe figures out the audio issue, any other questions or comments on this?
Uh,
Go ahead, Jason.
sorry, so the person from Virginia Housing was here? Was there action that was taken by that person or a follow-up? I just want to make sure I'm hearing that.
And
Yeah.
also too, sorry, just if you could turn on your camera while you talk, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, let
But
me
go ahead,
turn my
Shauna.
camera on.
Oh no, Shauna,
Sure.
you're fine. Sorry, that was just for commissioners.
Oh,
Not
okay. Sure
yeah,
thing.
you're fine.
All right, sure. So quickly, great question, Jason. Now I just remembered her name. Her name is Amy. She gave me her card, but I left it downstairs with the residence manager because we've been attempting since July to organize a residence council here because I've kind of been acting like the spokesperson. And like I said, people are calling, coming by my door. Hey, this is happening. But when Amy came, like I said, I'm going to reiterate, the manager for Paradigm walked around with her the whole time. She didn't give us a chance. We wanted to kind of talk to her alone. She did. They said they picked 5 apartments, and what do you know? Mine was one of the ones that was chosen. What we are experiencing, I'll quickly just say, I don't want to take up too much of the meeting, guys. We have these new smart meters here in this property. Now, again, everybody knows when a property is brand new, I mean, we're not even talking a year yet, barely a year, there should be no problems with HVAC, plumbing, or at least no major problems. But what we're experiencing is the air is toxic. The meter is reading toxic, or it's reading poor, meaning open the windows. And I'm having breathing problems that I've been reporting since January. So I explained all that to Amy. She came in, and here's the thing: we all know this on this line. When you take the car to the mechanic, it doesn't do what you're. So the meter wasn't reading good air, but it wasn't reading poor. It was reading somewhere in the middle. So she did make note of it. I showed her that all of my plants have been dying, and including many other neighbors on several other floors been reporting. I showed her some concerns about cracks that are here that I understand settling, but there's some things I'm like, well, could be mold. We just want testing to confirm or deny. It's about peace of mind and saving a major financial problem and sickness if we can. So what Amy said, she listened, but it was almost like everything I said, guys, the manager would follow up with something. Well, we did this. It was almost like she shot down everything I said. And keep in mind, I'm a great advocate. I do my best to articulate with no college experience, but I am a person living with some disabilities. And I started to feel like, man, she's not that she's ganging up on me, but I can see what she's doing. She's trying to get this woman from the county or from the housing to not really listen to what I'm saying and kind of demean what I'm trying to tell her here. And these are things that are not just existing and getting worse. I mean, it was almost 30, 40 degrees or 60 degrees the other night. We had to have the air on just so we can breathe in here. There's a problem. We believe that it's been a faulty or a very cheap HVAC installed. We're just asking for testing. We're just asking for mold because we've had leaks on 3 of the 4 floors in here. Once in July, once in June, a month after the building opened. They kept it under the wraps. We've got video. And I think once just recently, about a few months ago, where instead of doing proper mold remediation, they gave the tenants a few fans and told them to keep quiet. That's a problem. So I couldn't tell all that to Amy, but I did my best to talk because the manager wouldn't leave. She just stood there. Um, so to answer your question, I hope I'm not running on. I did my best to tell her, but when we left my apartment, we went back downstairs and Amy chose to go, and I took her in to meet the resident service person who's been trying to help us. And she said to Amy, I need to talk to you without the property manager. In other words, alluding to the fact, hey, this woman needs to stay in her office and let me talk to you and tell you what's really going on. You see, so, and this all just happened today. So to answer your question, I hope that answers your question. I told her as much as I could, but Amy did say she wasn't the person that overseen this building opening, but she did say, poor quality in air, breathing issues we're experiencing within a year, that could be an issue. So we just need the testing, guys. We really do.
I appreciate that, Shauna. And I think, let's see if Joe can ask this question. This will probably be the last question because I know we're 20 minutes in and we have a lot else to cover. No, it's okay. We very much appreciate you bringing this issue to us. Go ahead, Joe.
Can you hear me now? It's really not a question. I just want to know, where is the property located?
Good question, Joe. We're at 1420 South Rolfe, and I'll spell it for you. R is in Randy, Octopus, O, L is in Larry, F is in Frank, E is in Edward. 1420 South Rolfe Street, and that is, the zip is what? 22204. Okay, property opened in, absolutely, opened in May of 2024.
Thank you, Shauna. And Alex, do you have Shauna's contact info?
Yes, I do. I can make that connection.
Great. So Shauna, we're going to follow up. Thank you so much for bringing this issue to our attention. But the good news is that I think staff is well prepared for these types of issues, because unfortunately we've had to deal with them in the past, but a lot of positive changes have happened. So, but I will definitely follow up with staff to make sure that they can, figure out a resolution for you and other residents who are experiencing similar issues. So thank you for coming and sorry for what you've been experiencing.
That's okay. I'd just like to say you guys are heaven sent for the work you do. And I'd like to continue being a part of the meeting.
Thank you. Of course. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the approval of notes. Alex, I noticed one thing up front in terms of the attendance. It listed Joe as being present virtually, but Mike being absent. I think that's reversed, that Joe was absent and Mike was present virtually.
Yep, Joe reached out to me as well and pointed that out, so I have made that change.
Sounds good. There was one other change. It was just clarity for the legislative proposals, where it said Jason Swartz, like that paragraph. And the second sentence, he said he asked to include language noting that the staff's conclusion was inconclusive. Um, I think it's a little confusing. And I'm trying to think back. It was around, was it construction costs that specifically, Jason, you wanted the specific language from the staff report included in the legislative proposal. I'm trying to think exactly what that was on, but if we could just add a little bit more specificity there, because I think just saying that the conclusion was inconclusive is confusing.
Yep, happy to work with you and Jason on fixing that part.
Sounds good. Katie.
Yeah, sorry, just one other thing. I noticed in the legislative priorities section, it kind of refers to the priorities by the number, but then it doesn't really say like what they are. So I was just wondering if you could just put the title of the priorities when you refer to them by the number, just for clarity.
Yep, do that.
Thank you.
Any other amendments? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank
Second.
you. Any objection to approving the minutes? Hearing none, they are approved. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is the home ownership study, which is an information item.
Good evening. My name is Richard Tucker. I'm with the Housing Division. I'm the Housing Arlington Coordinator. I'm here tonight with Kyria Brown, who is our homeownership program coordinator. Unfortunately, Caitlin Jones, who is the project manager for this whole study, couldn't be with us tonight. So you have one half of the A team tonight, who's Kyria, and you have me. So we're going to make it work. If we can get to the next slide. So we have a lot to cover tonight. So we're going to try and do it very, very quickly, particularly part 1 through 4, because what our main goal tonight is to discuss with you the recommendations that have come from the study, which we've undertaken since 2022. And we'll also, so starting at the top, we'll give you a lot of background. Where did this study come from? Discuss some of our phase 1 work, looking at barriers analysis and an assessment of our existing programs. And then how in phase 2, we developed a home ownership vision and goals and some other ideas around that. And then we'll get into the meat of it, which is the program recommendations. And then the last thing we'll cover is the HUD Pro Housing Grant application opportunity, which just arose as we were coming to the point where we wanted to share the study the study recommendations with everyone. Now, so going to jump into this very quickly. We're going to go fast, but there will be some pauses to allow for any comments or questions. We do want to get your feedback tonight, and we have stripped this down quite a bit just so we can make sure we have time for you all to give your input. So starting with the background and going way back, in fact, Housing Arlington, the Housing Arlington Initiative was started in 2019 as a coordinated effort to put more focus on our housing supply and housing affordability, our two main goals. So I work with everyone in housing and in planning on a number of levels to achieve more focus for all the things that we could do, should do, being very creative, thinking outside the box, and so forth. And of note, in 2022, we added a homeownership initiative within Housing Arlington. And we took what we had previously had as the condo initiative, which was a full-fledged initiative, and we sort of subsumed that inside of that. So that was in 2022, and that was sort of our starting point for getting into the review of our homeownership programs. Next slide. So when we start a planning process, it's good to look at any policy guidance that is in place that can help guide us. So in this case, we looked at the Affordable Housing Master Plan, and in fact, there are three policy objectives and policy priorities that apply to the work that we could be doing in this area. One is to produce and preserve a sufficient supply of affordable ownership housing to meet future needs. So looking proactively in the future, providing assistance to create access to ownership housing for moderate and middle income first-time homebuyers, and then also providing support so that older adults can age in place in the community. So those were some guiding points that we looked at. In completing the Affordable Housing Master Plan review in 2022, with that came an implementation framework, which outlines work to be done in the next 5 years. And importantly, as part of that, we had identified developing a new overarching and integrative approach to homeownership program implementation. So that was really the kickoff and the start of this idea of having a homeownership study. So for the study, our goals were to clarify the community's vision and goals for homeownership programs, create better homeownership outcomes for persons of color and others underserved populations, and to increase available resources for existing homeowners. And under that, we had a number of objectives, which I'll cover in the next few slides, which became work items for our study. So as I mentioned before, the study was started in 2022. We expect to conclude here before the end of the year, hopefully. We had 3 phases. So in phase 1, we assessed homeownership market data. We looked at purchase barriers, other economic and demographic characteristics of owners. And we also looked at the history of our homeownership assistance programs and took a hard look at how those have performed, whether there were gaps, what improvements could be made, or what we can assess from that. In phase 2, which was our phase where we did our primary community engagement, so we had a number of meetings in small and large rooms, out in the public in various ways. And the chief goal of phase 2 was to come up with a vision statement and goals for our homeownership programs. And we're now in phase 3. We worked in the interim with a consulting group to sort of survey all the information that we had compiled, both the data and analysis and assessments of our current programs, the input that we received in phase 2, and we looked at our existing programs and asked them to come up with some additional recommendations for new programs as well. So we're in phase 3 now, where we're reviewing those draft recommendations, and we're moving towards closure on those. Oh, and so I'll stop at this point and I'll let Akiria jump in and tell us about our phase 1 work and what we learned during that process.
Thanks, Richard. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Akiria Brown, and I am with CPHD. So this slide illustrates the spectrum of the county's primary homeownership programs and their respective area of median income level served. So for the purposes of the study, we focused on homeownership programs and those that are here noted in blue. If you are unfamiliar with these programs, we will go into a bit more detail in the coming slides. So last October, we released the homeownership barriers analysis, where we reported on trends related to the homeownership market in the county, such as homeownership rates, the cost burden rates for owner households, as well as mortgage financing trends. The research validated our long-held understanding that racial minorities and other underrepresented populations often fare differently in the homeownership market than their white counterparts. In terms of key findings, residential development, as we know, is mostly producing mid and high-rise apartments, and there's very little ownership products being produced. While the number of homeowners in the county has increased, the homeownership rate has declined, indicating a lack of supply in the market. The second chart indicates how affordable typologies are generally limited to condos. There are seldom occurrences of townhomes and single-family detached homes below the $500,000 price point. We also note that racial minorities have the lowest ownership rates as reflected here. Furthermore, mortgage denial rates and mortgage interest rates are higher, particularly for Hispanic or Latino households, as well as Black households, who are charged higher mortgage interest rates than their white counterparts. We also see disparities in rate spread. Rate spread is essentially the difference between the interest rate for an average buyer on a loan and the rate that others would be having at that same time. So it essentially shows how much more one group is paying in interest compared to the standard benchmark, which can highlight disparities and does so here in this case. So for more in-depth information related to the county's homeownership landscape, we encourage you to review the homeownership barriers analysis, which can be found on our study webpage. Next, we took a look at the county's existing homeownership programs. We analyzed the programs that are operated directly by the county, as well as those programs that are provided by third-party entities that the county supports. And so as a point of reference, at the time of our analysis, a household of 4 earning 80% of the area median income earned about $113,000 a year. So one of the first steps along the road to sustainable homeownership is a well-rounded understanding of the fundamental concepts of the home buying process. Homebuyer education helps prospective buyers to assess their overall readiness to purchase by assessing their need for a mortgage loan, the costs associated with maintaining a home, and basic personal finance. So of the 199 Arlington residents who completed homebuyer education, 18 of those households purchased homes in the county within the same period. MyPAP is the county's first-time homebuyer program that provides down payment assistance in the form of a rate buy-down, closing cost assistance to households earning up to 80% of the area median income. Let me correct that. So it's down payment assistance as well as rate buy-down and closing cost assistance. I just wanted to clarify. So MyPAP assistance amounts have increased over time from a maximum loan of $25,000 in 2003 to the current maximum loan amount of $112,000. So combined with the 30-year conventional mortgage, MyPAP loans are essentially considered a second-year trust because these loans have no interest and they have no monthly payments associated with them. So as you can see here, we currently have at the time where we were evaluating these programs, about 127 active loans, and the average MyPAP loan was $73,000. The county's Affordable Dwelling Unit program provides affordable, newly constructed resale properties to income-eligible home buyers. Units must be sold and resold to eligible purchasers at deed-restricted prices, and those prices aligned with the area median income increases as published by HUD on an annual basis. About 12 of our affordable dwelling units are affordable to households up to 60% of AMI, and 47 or so of those units are affordable to households up to 80% of the area median income. These units are obtained through developer contribution, and the county had previously contracted with AHC to manage this program, And this included purchaser eligibility, facilitation of sale and resales, as well as managing the property renovations at resale. So what did we learn? So through our analysis of the county's existing programs, we determined that there were several insights that would help to be building blocks for our community engagement and the development of our vision and goals. So in terms of MyPap, we see that single purchasers are willing to purchase smaller units. Additionally, there is an increase of single white buyers in their mid-20s to mid-30s, many of which are living with their parents or have multiple roommates until they purchase. They are also early in their careers, and this is important because it enables them to meet income eligibility criteria without having considerable debt. We also see that purchasers with larger household sizes are limited by the presence of average household debts. So a car note or one student loan or one credit card really impacts these households. So having one or more of these debts is often a determining factor in whether or not that household can afford to purchase a home to accommodate a growing family. In terms of our ADU program, we see that supply is limited. There is minimal turnover among these units, and buyers tend to stay put. Spark is a program that the county participates in along with Virginia Housing. It is a program that offers a 1% interest rate reduction on Virginia housing loans. What we see here is very similar to MyPap. Spark buyers are predominantly one-person households. We often see two-person households, but it's very uncommon for us to see households that are more than two. And so this often overlaps with our MyPap borrowers as well, knowing that these tend to be the households that purchase in the county with down payment assistance programs. Rebuilding Together is a nonprofit organization that makes critical repairs at no charge for low-income homeowners and nonprofit organizations. The majority of the repairs are for health and safety reasons. The program is, however, limited by the amount of funding, as well as the available skill set among volunteers. So because of this, the program prioritizes seniors, people living with disabilities, families with children, and veterans. So what we see among households with that go through our homebuyer education programs is that homebuyer education provides really valuable knowledge, but the decision to purchase is often driven by individual circumstances rather than the timing of when the education is received. So many other factors influence when someone buys a home, and that timing of purchase may be years after they take classes. So factors include market conditions, personal finance readiness, or availability of desired properties. And lastly, the county provides an exemption or deferral of real estate taxes for qualified homeowners age 65 and older, and certain permanently disabled or totally disabled homeowners who meet income eligibility. We see through our study that this program is vital in enabling those eligible homeowners to remain in their homes as rising property values drive up housing costs. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Richard to discuss the homeownership study, vision, and goals.
Okay, so we've completed phase one, and we're moving forward into phase two. I'm going to pause because we've been talking for a few minutes here and ask if there are any questions about, how we got here with the study and any of the analysis that went into phase one.
This is Doris. I have one if after commissioners.
Go ahead, Doris.
Oh, okay. I just was wondering if you have data in this study on the availability of um, accessible housing for people with disabilities and seniors who have physical disabilities in particular, um, and and the percentage that are participating in the programs, particularly the home ownership aspect of it, and whether they're having difficulty finding uh, single family dwellings or even condominiums that are accessible, and whether they face any policy issues with regard to getting any accessibility modifications done.
Mhm. Well, Doris, I'll just say, I don't think we look specifically at the supply of accessible dwellings that are available for homeownership. And one of the things, and you mentioned whether it's single family or condo, but one thing that we know is that there's not a lot of homeownership supply that falls within the affordability range for the people that we're targeting. So that's sort of a separate issue. But we may have, and I'll just check and see if what information we might have about the supply of accessible homeownership or otherwise units in Arlington, and I'll get back to you separately.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I only know one person who's on the program who has physical disabilities, and the other thing is I do know that we have from time to time people moving into the area to work for the federal government or industry like Amazon and such who have problems finding, if they're particularly in the mid range, finding housing, and they're going out of county to find
Hmm.
what they need to buy.
Hmm. Sure. All right. So phase two and the development of homeownership vision and goals. So this next slide uh, just illustrates something that we put together with all of our planning processes to uh, uh, indicate all the various touch points for our process, whether it be online feedback, in-person meetings and pop-ups, virtual meetings, and engagement with the county board. So we've had a robust process to arrive at to receive the input that we've gotten, to arrive at some of the recommendations that we've developed. So I just wanted to share that with the commission. Next slide, to drill down just a little bit. In our phase two work, we had a series of roundtables and focus groups, and those engagements included new and prospective home buyers, real estate professionals like lenders and realtors, just to get a sense of how people use our programs, uh, um, how our programs are being marketed, how pervasive is the knowledge of our programs. So those were instructive sort of engagements. We also did some online engagements and got over, as well as pop-ups, and we got over 1,000 unique responses. And with those pop-ups, we tried to go to where people are. We were looking specifically for areas where you might find renters. We went to senior centers to talk with seniors to see if we can engage them and find out what some of their needs and concerns were. So we did a lot of work in that area as well. And then we worked with the uh, Housing Commission's subcommittee, the homeownership subcommittee. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Karen Surface for being our chair and working so closely with us. But we had a number of meetings with our subcommittee, and then a big meeting with them and the broader community, and a big community workshop as we were developing our vision and goals. So one big question that we asked is, what should the county's role be in ensuring that there are homeownership opportunities. And people said, yes, the county should have a role in that. And they gave us specific ideas about, in the ways in which we should participate and act. One is that we should be targeting our programs to groups facing barriers. Another is increasing supply and housing types. Another is increasing access to financing and making sure that those financing tools are distributed in a way that's equitable, supporting existing homeowners, excuse me, particularly older adults. Uh, and one of the challenging things is, as we know, our condo supply, our condo stock is getting older, and then there are a number of issues that we face with that. And then, so those were some of the issues that we were identified for us, and we sort of incorporated those certainly in the recommendations that we've now developed. So working with the subcommittee, we did develop a vision for our homeownership programs, and that vision is Arlington's homeownership programs serve as a catalyst to preserve and expand affordable homeownership opportunities. And from that, working with a broader group, we came up with some goals. And these are not in priority order, they're just numbered. Four goals: reduce racial homeownership gaps, support existing homeowners in maintaining housing in the community, increase the production of homeownership housing supply, and create pathways to homeownership for renters. So those are our goals that we developed, again, with a lot of help from the community, and that really shaped the recommendations that we then were able to produce.
All right, so taking all this data and information collected over the course of our first two phases, staff developed program recommendations to refine how some of these barriers and challenges could be addressed through new and existing homeownership county programs. So before we get into specifics, we wanted to show a summary. We also wanted to highlight that our intention behind this effort is to ensure that we are ultimately offering a more robust suite of services for both home buyers and existing homeowners. So among these recommendations, what you will see is the framework intended to meet the goals that we previously outlined. What you will not see are specific program criteria and guidelines. Those elements will need to be developed and will be informed by our vision and goals, as well as legal and funding parameters. So as far as impact, we believe that these recommendations will lead to a more equitable outcomes for populations that have traditionally not participated in the homeownership market. We believe that we are creating more opportunities for existing homeowners, particularly given that there are few offerings available now. These recommendations will also better address barriers for prospective buyers to the extent that we can as a local government. And we also think that these efforts will address homeownership supply challenges. We will pause between each recommendation for questions, or you can feel free to save your questions until the end of the presentation. So the first recommendation is for the MyPAP program. There are 4 core elements of the MyPAP recommendations. The first involves program eligibility. Most notably, we recommend an increase to the maximum purchase price from $500,000 to $650,000. Secondly, we recommend targeted assistance with intentionality using data that we've compiled, as well as an equity lens to identify and support historically marginalized buyers. This is going to require designing programs to meet homeowners' diverse needs while addressing systemic inequities that disproportionately affect marginalized groups. Thirdly, provide a modest level of support to prospective buyers with incomes above our current income limits, which is 80% of AMI. So the recommendation proposes maximum income levels of 100% of the area median income. And lastly, we recommend that we strengthen our partnerships with real estate professionals. So specific to actual assistance, this recommendation splits the MyPAP into 3 tiers. The first tier would focus on priority communities at or below 80% of the area median income. And this would be a forgivable loan under certain conditions. This second tier would focus assistance to households below 80% of the area median income, and it mirrors the existing MyPAP structure, meaning that it is not a forgivable loan. It must be repaid at the 30-year mark or prior to that. Most often times, folks repay us at refinance, and it also has a shared appreciation model. A third tier would support households between 80 and 100% of the area median income, creating a deferred loan, meaning that it has to still be repaid, but there are no monthly payments associated with it. But it also has lower assistance amounts, with the maximum amount being about $25,000 per applicant. So with that said, do we have any questions specific to the MyPAP program's recommendations?
So just to clarify, the first and the second box, the difference is that the first box, which is new, is forgivable and the second one is not? Or and what does it mean when it's saying support households annually?
Support households annually. Right. Yeah. So we're looking at households that are below 80% of the area median income, but we're looking at priority communities. So for this first tier, priority communities could be households that are currently owners of a affordable dwelling unit, or households that meet other criteria that have been identified as a priority, depending on how those priorities are determined. And then there's the second tier, which again mirrors the existing program. So it's largely looking at priority communities versus the applicants as a whole. That
Okay,
would be
great.
the difference
And the
between the
difference is
first
just
and the second tier.
okay, and the difference is that the priority communities might get their loan forgiven.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask, how is an affordable dwelling unit defined? I know
Sure.
different counties have different things in Virginia.
Right. And I'm just going to quickly go back to that slide. So affordable dwelling units are obtained through developer contributions in exchange for additional density. And these units in Arlington are these ownership units that must be sold and resold to buyers that meet income criteria. These units have permanent restrictions on them, and those restrictions are in the deed. So essentially, they are deed restricted units, and they must be sold and resold to households that meet income criteria, but therefore they also have to remain affordable to those households. And the way that they are remaining affordable is that they increase in value in alignment with the HUD area median income increases. So if the HUD AMI increases 3%, then the ADU value would increase 3% for that particular year. And that is in order for us to keep those units affordable to households that sell them and resell them.
So you have to certify each year to be in that
No,
program?
no. So households do not have to remain at any particular income, but when they purchase the home, they have to meet income criteria. There is no annual certification because these units are owned by owners. There would be no way that the county would be able to say you are no longer eligible for this house, so you can no longer own it, right? Because they are owned outright by the purchaser. So there are no annual income recertifications, but the new owner, whenever those units are resold, must meet income criteria.
Okay.
Okay, so and here is just a quick summary of how Arlington's existing down payment assistance program and the expanded down payment assistance program would stack up against other regional jurisdictions. Um, I will note that the county's program provides one of the largest loan amounts across the country relative to the number of requirements. So regionally, programs vary primarily by funding amounts, interest rates, and residency requirements. In terms of performance, our program has largely performed similarly to the program in the city of Alexandria as well as Loudoun County. But our county's program does not have a residency requirement and allows for higher debt to income ratio criteria than neighboring jurisdictions. The proposed changes suggest a cap of $100,000 for households earning up to 80% of AMI, with forgivable assistance to, again, priority communities and deferred loans to other buyers. Additionally, the proposed changes offer modest yet impactful support to buyers between 81 and 100% of the AMI. It's here. Okay, so with that, I'll move on to our second recommendation. The second recommendation is for our ADU program or affordable dwelling units. Our recommendations are to examine the physical condition of the existing ADUs to better understand repair and maintenance needs, as we also want to take a closer look at the resale restrictions for these units and determine whether revising these restrictions would ease barriers to wealth building and also better incentivize owners to keep up these homes' maintenance. So currently, the affordable dwelling units are affordable into perpetuity. So essentially, they are affordable forever. So we want to look at potentially revising the resale formula to determine whether or not this would improve wealth building to potential buyers, and then also incentivize them to just keep up the homes. As part of the creation of the home improvement program, which we'll discuss in more detail in later slides, our recommendation is to also carve out a set aside of funding to address ADU repair and maintenance needs for aging ADUs, which will assist in meeting our goals to support owners that need help in maintaining their housing, but also help to protect the supply of affordable dwelling units. So with that, I'll stop here if there are any questions with regard to our affordable dwelling unit programs or these recommendations.
Yeah, I have a question. How many ADU programs do we have already?
So at the time of the study, we had about 59, and currently we have 62 affordable dwelling units throughout the county.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wondered, in home improvements, because this is, I think, an excellent idea. Would you include things like upgrading or making modifications to plumbing and drainage in a bathroom so that you could stay in the home or purchase the home through the program if you need like a no threshold roll-in shower, which becomes a problem with you know, depending on when the property was built.
Yeah, I think that providing assistance for accessibility upgrades is really something that would be top on our list. We want to make sure that we provide funding for those types of needs. Currently, Rebuilding Together is the only entity that is offering that type of assistance. And while we really know that it's critical, they are limited by the amount of funding that they are operating with. So we would like to expand and utilize funding from our home improvement loan program to assist. And I will go into that loan program here shortly, because there are some aspects of that program that would really greatly benefit households that would need the accessibility upgrades. And we are looking at different models of operating that program.
Jason,
oh, sorry, I don't know whose hand is up. Oh, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, so the revising the formula for resale, that would, I guess, just clarify if I'm wrong, that would allow the existing owner to get more value when they sell, but then that would make it more expensive for the new purchaser. Is that correct?
Potentially. So when we think about revising the formula, we're looking at the fact that these units are currently needing to be affordable into perpetuity or forever. And so we're wondering if there are other ways that we can get that affordability for a decent amount of time, but also incentivize owners to maintain their units, which may end up being a problem if we keep these units at in perpetuity restrictions, because owners may not be incentivized to make upgrades. And so, yes, ultimately, it would take those units out of the affordable dwelling unit program, if you will, and they would no longer be affordable after that expiration. And so that is something that we want to just kind of look into to see if that would make sense to do. We don't get a whole lot of these units on an annual basis. And so we would really need to look at the cost benefit of making any changes to the resale restrictions. Other communities have resale restrictions in the 30-year range, because that's typically what a mortgage is. There are some communities, City of Alexandria has a 15-year affordability restriction on some of their ADUs. And so I think we just want to take a look at our programs to determine whether or not this is something that we want to do.
Zach.
Thank you. Carrie, I think you mentioned in response to another question that there are no recertification requirements. I'm curious to understand, was there a particular reason that was decided, or any context and background on that would be helpful. I could see a situation where somebody is in a circumstance where they need a no or low interest loan, and then 10 years later or 5 years later, they maybe inherit money, or they marry somebody who's got a little bit more money, or for whatever reason, they have more money at the time and now are still accruing the benefits of a lower no interest loan. Anyway, I'll let you respond.
Right. So, yeah. So the MyPAP program is separate from an affordable dwelling unit. So the MyPAP program is a down payment assistance loan, and then there's the ADU, and the ADU is the unit itself. Not all ADU owners have a MyPAP loan, and not all MyPAP households have ADUs. And so what we know is that with ADUs, once someone purchases the unit, us having a mechanism in place where we are recertifying these households to determine whether or not they still income qualify or are within an income range, there really is not much that the county could do to change whether or not that household continues to live in the home that they purchased. So there really is not a reason for us to come back and ask folks to income certify, because it's quite different than like a rental unit where it's not owned by the occupant, but in this case, the occupant owns it and they have the right to live there. We want people to be able to increase their income throughout the time that they own the home. But yeah, the a mechanism in place to verify income would be legally challenging if someone were no longer within the income limit criteria.
And sorry, I meant that in reference to the MyPAP program. I know I asked it on this slide, so that's my fault.
Okay, okay. Right, yeah, so the MyPAP loan is a loan where you have to be 80% of AMI in order to obtain the loan. I guess what you're saying is that you're asking whether or not the county would call the loan due if a household were over income. Is that your thought process?
Yeah, I thought you had said on the previous slide when we were talking about MyPAP that there are no recertification requirements, and that was my only question
Right.
was the background on that.
Yeah, because MyPAP is a loan, right? So it's not necessarily an ongoing program. It's a second loan, just like a second loan from a traditional lender. It's just that it's from the county, but it must be repaid. And then the county gets a share of the appreciation. So actually, owners of MyPAP with MyPAP loans are incentivized to refinance out of that loan sooner than later, because whenever they pay us back, they have to pay us a share of the appreciation. So if they pay us back in 5 years, we get a share of that appreciation, versus if they paid us back in 25 years, that appreciation is going to be far larger than it would have been at the 5 year mark. So MyPAP borrowers are certainly incentivized to refinance out of their loan and repay the county as soon as possible. And so maybe that has more to do with what you're thinking, and the possibility of just having that income test along the way, because oftentimes when folks do increase their income and they are in a better financial situation, they are able to pay off the county in one way or another. So it kind of ends up happening one way at some point.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so yes.
Sorry. Well, I had a comment and a question. So my comment is related to what Jason was asking about with the whether the ADUs would stop being affordable. I am concerned about that because there's so few of them already. And then the question is about the MyPAP again, just to clarify. So it sounds like it usually is a no interest loan. And so then they would, whenever they decide to pay it back, they would pay back the amount of the loan, and then also money from the appreciation of the home.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Our third recommendation is to expand support. Staff is recommending that we expand education and technical assistance opportunities beyond the current condo education series. So currently the county does work with the city of Alexandria to provide condo education. So we want to go beyond that. This would involve creating an Arlington specific education program, having full control over the design of that curriculum, creating a more personalized approach that would respond to immediate challenges facing condo communities. But we're also hoping to expand these offerings even further to provide more one-on-one and technical assistance to condo boards on governance challenges and issues that can be addressed properly through education. So to address the financial and maintenance challenges of condo owners, we are proposing to carve out a set aside within the revamped home improvement loan program to both support low and moderate income condo owners that need to make improvements to their units, but also to support condo owners that are impacted by special assessments. We currently do not have a mechanism in place to support condo owners in this capacity. So we are hoping that these improvements together will respond to our goal to assist condo owners in maintaining their housing. Do we have any questions with regard to the third recommendation? Okay, I will move on. The fourth recommendation is to support households through education and technical assistance for home buyer as well as homeowner education. So with regard to home buyers, we want to reach out to the right people. We want to focus on targeted outreach to make sure that communities that need it most can access comprehensive homebuyer education. This will include minority and underserved communities, as well as buyers with limited financial and literacy ability, young buyers, as well as non-native English speakers. Secondly, we want to support home buyers with a cohort program, more information to be presented shortly. But with regard to existing homeowner programs, which will likely be provided through third-party vendors, the recommendation is to provide post-purchase education to help new homeowners manage their new responsibilities effectively. This recommendation also includes help to condo owners and boards, and this would be done by expanding our support for the current condo education series, as well as allocating resources for technical assistance to condo boards and associations. Do we have any questions on the education and technical assistance? I think I see a hand, or Zach, is your hand still up? Or
I didn't intend it to be. I'm sorry.
okay, it's okay.
Carrie,
Is it down now?
Okay. I'm sorry, Richard.
Yeah, I put it down for you, Zach. Carrie, I want to stop for a second and check with the chair and see in terms of the overall schedule if we want to pause at this point. We do.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you. Please jump in. Tell me what you think.
I mean, I think there's a way to go slightly faster. I know we're behind schedule, but that is not an infrequent occurrence for our commission. But I think if you could try to wrap up
Yeah.
in maybe the next 5 minutes, which I know you still have to get through the new programs, but
Okay.
I'm sure there will be a number of questions and things.
So
Is that possible?
Not a
Go ahead,
problem.
Richard.
Well, actually, what I was going to suggest, and when we tackled this with subcommittee, we sort of broke at this point and we had a second meeting. So we can stop here. I actually do want to fast forward to the HUD program just to get that on the table for you all and maybe take the 5 minutes to go over that.
Yeah, and come back like next month to talk
Yep.
about the new programs. Yeah, I'm
That
fine with
works
that
for
as
me.
well.
Yep.
Sure. Because I know some people at the end of your agenda would like to get some time with you tonight. So let me jump in here and just talk about the HUD Pro Housing Grant. We had not intended to, or we intended to talk about the homeownership study in and of itself, but in the middle of that, we were presented with an opportunity to apply for some HUD funding to help implement these recommendations. And so it's an opportunity in terms of the timing because this application to HUD is actually due next Tuesday. So we have a draft that we've put on our webpage, on the homeownership study webpage. It is an opportunity to request up to $7 million. Um, then the grantees may use these funds to further develop, evaluate, and implement housing policy plans, improve housing strategies, and facilitate affordable housing production and preservation, which I think is the key, is right up the alley of what our study is telling us to do. So there's $100 million available nationwide. We're going to apply for approximately $7 million. Um, we think our proposals, our recommendations for the study are in line with a national objective of assisting low and moderate income households. I'm going to skip over these next two slides and give you the budget and talk through that. So it's a 5-year allocation of funding, so we have to complete all activities within that time frame. And so you see the big number at the bottom, just under $7 million, will be just under the maximum. So under the MyPath program, we would be funding that cohort of households at above 80% and below 100% of area median income, something we're not able to serve right now with our current funding. So that's what that would be for. For the affordable dwelling unit program, that is money to get an outside consultant to assess our affordable dwelling units to see what condition they're in. For the condo education and technical assistance, that's money for also for outside vendor to help us to have our own condo education series and provide some technical assistance to condo associations as needed. We want to initiate the post-purchase education program as well, so there's funding for that. The home buyer cohort, these are 3 new things that we haven't discussed tonight. So the home buyer cohort would be a new, more hands-on approach to home buyer education. And then the home improvement loan program, which would be a new thing, something that we had years ago. We want to bring it back, and that sort of dovetails with some of the other work that we would do. And then the last thing is a homeownership production fund, actually creating affordable homeownership supply and being creative about that. If you look at this budget, you can see some of the numbers ramp up. Some of these things begin in year 2 because we have to do some program design. And in the first year, we may not uh, produce as many, let's say, MyPath loans as we would in subsequent years. For the home improvement loan program, we will ramp up with that one as well. We may not do as many of those in the first year 2, as we would do in subsequent years. There is some new staffing that's wrapped up in some of these numbers as well. We would need at least 2 staff positions to complete this work. So that's also in the grant as well. So that was very quick. If you have any questions about that, certainly contact us or give us your comments now, because we're gonna get this thing sent to the HUD by Tuesday. So looking at the schedule, as of course you know, we have met with the subcommittee at this point twice. We're here tonight. The HUD program application is out for public review. We're going to complete that and send it off by Tuesday. But there are continued opportunities for engagement. And since we did not get through all the recommendations tonight, we can hopefully schedule for your next meeting. Ultimately, this will be a matter that we will share with the county board as a county manager report. No action on their part, but we're just going to inform them of the recommendations that we've developed, the input that we've received, and then we would then turn to implementation in the next calendar year. So I'll stop there. Any last questions? We can certainly take that so you can get onto the rest of your agenda.
It looks good. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, one quick question. The affordable dwelling unit program, you may want to say AFFDU because a lot of people will think it's accessible dwelling units. Has that ever came up? Has anyone ever? I mean,
Yeah. So in Arlington, and this is, goes back many years, ADU has always meant affordable dwelling unit, and accessible dwellings, which is more of a new phenomenon, is we call ADs. So that's our terminology, which is different from other jurisdictions, but we started that way. So I think we're just going to say everybody else is wrong.
okay.
It's actually quite similar in some other jurisdictions in Virginia. But yes, we have encountered that issue where folks are just kind of thinking that we're talking about accessory dwelling units. But in the housing code, we refer to affordable dwelling units as ADUs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know we also had public comment on this agenda item, and I do want to get to that. So Richard and Akiria, if you don't have additional presentation things, I'd like to move to the public comment for this item.
Sure.
Great. Okay. Alice?
Good evening, Alice Hogan, Navajo, Arlington. Thank you for your presentation and all the hard work. I had a few questions, and I'll just maybe list them off a little since I have my limited time. I wondered about feasibility for buyers who make up to 80% of AMI. So I would just love to hear you all staff talk a little bit about how financially feasible that would be for that cohort to be able to maintain a home at the prices we have in Arlington. And kind of with that was, I saw where you were removing the credit score requirement. And again, not that that wouldn't be a good thing to do. However, knowing someone's credit score is part of how you figure out if they would be able to pay and maintain, a mortgage. So I was just curious about how, I know there's an equity component, but also we don't want to set people up for failure. So I was just curious your thoughts on that balance. I also wondered why we don't have a residency requirement here, like many of the other jurisdictions seem to. There'll be people who have lived here for years and years and would love to buy, and to have people coming in from another community with no roots in the community to be able to benefit equally is kind of interesting. So I wondered your thoughts on that also. I have many others, but I'll put them on the form online. My last one, actually two, about pro application. One is I saw that the real estate tax relief program review you have set up for year 5, but I believe that one was supposed to be reviewed in 2022 based on the previous review. So if that's correct, we're 2 or 3 years late now. I'm wondering why we need to wait another 5 when we know that program probably needs some adjustments to be made to it. And then my final one is about the MyPap, something similar. I'm wondering why it needs to go to year 2 when we know folks can't afford, down payments now. Could we upload, front load that money to next year since the program already exists to help people a little bit sooner? Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Staff, if you have any immediate responses you're prepared to provide for those questions, happy to entertain that now, if you're able.
Yeah, really quick. I can, Alice, I can kind of give you some bulletized responses, and more than happy to provide a little bit more detail later. In terms of your first question about feasibility for buyers earning up to 80% of AMI, currently the average MyPAP borrower earns about 74% of the area median income. So we are certainly seeing households that are not right there at 80%, slightly lower than that. And so we do anticipate that that will continue. Programs like MyPAP and the Spark providing 1% interest rate reduction is essential for cobbling together the resources to make these units affordable, for deepening that affordability level. So, I mean, it's always something that we will have to continue to keep our eyes on. And then in terms of removing the credit score requirement, we see it as a redundancy because MyPAP borrowers have to have a first trust. So they have to have a first trust loan from a Virginia housing approved lender. So having us having a credit score requirement is more of a redundancy because they will have to have the credit score in order to get a first trust loan through a first trust lender. So if that credit score is 658, which is actually lower than our credit score requirement, we don't want to stand in the way if a Virginia housing approved lender is going to approve them for a first trust, conventional first trust. And then thirdly, the residency requirement. Really quickly, about more than 80% of the MyPAP borrowers are Arlington County residents when they apply for the program. But also we have a preference policy where if we get to a point where we have limited funds and we have to choose, households that either live and or work in the county do receive preference for MyPAP. So we have not gotten to a point where we had only enough funds for one household, and we had to choose between a household that didn't live in the county versus one that did live in the county. But if the need arose, we do prefer households that live and or work in the county. And then I'll let Richard answer any questions with regard to the pro grant. And then your last question, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. So if you want to reiterate it or email us, feel free to do that.
Yeah, there were two questions about the HUD program. One was the real estate tax relief and why in year 5. I'll say this frankly, you want to talk about it, Alice. Other people want to talk about it, and everybody wants to talk about this. So I think it's going to be some time before there's consensus about what we should be talking about on that. On MyPAP and frankly all of the recommendations, there's some level of program design that needs to happen. So we may be notified by HUD in the springtime. Funding may be available to us in a year from now, next October. But then, there's a period of program design to implement what we would like to do. So it wouldn't happen on day one. It would be some time after that.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from members of the commission? Okay. Well, thank you, Richard and Akiria, for coming for this presentation. Looking forward to part 2. I guess probably November. Thank you for your engagement with the homeownership subcommittee as well. And yeah, I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Thanks. Good night, everyone.
The next item on our agenda is the Crystal House 3 4% AHIF allocation and pre-development loan.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Chris with the county, and thanks to the homeownership team for helping facilitate this meeting in a 2-parter. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to do a little quick presentation. This is, I think, the 4th time I've been here talking about Crystal House's stuff. So let me see that I can pull this up. 1 second. I'm gonna kind of breeze through this, and we also sent some information in advance. So let's see. All right, can folks see this?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. and then True Ground. Our folks from True Ground, formerly known as APA, will do a short presentation after this. So yes, this is the 4% AHIF allocation and commitment, and AHIF pre-development loan and early start related to the first affordable infill building that's gonna be coming out of the ground very shortly on the Crystal Houses site. So just a quick background reminder, if folks haven't been dialed in on this, the Crystal Houses 1 and 2 are existing buildings, about 826 units that were acquired by Washington Housing Conservancy in 2020. An Amazon affiliate acquired the already entitled development rights, which were entitled in 2019, and then assigned those development rights to county with a whole bunch of conditions to essentially provide affordable housing with a small amount of market rate housing to help leverage on the affordable housing side. And county undertook a quite lengthy process over about 2 years to select development team, which at the time was APA, and EYA is now True Ground Housing Partners and EYA. That was just a name change. There's not anything other substantively. So the development partners have been working in the last 2 years, essentially a year and a half, on a number of pre-development activities. And this is the first one going into development. So this is the companion to the 9% component, which came back in March. So it's a 9-4 combo deal. This is 344 units. The other component, the 9%, is 88 units. This is a complicated financing structure that's pretty commonly used in Virginia, and we've seen a number of these through the years. This is a nearly $30 million AHIF loan to the 4% side. The 9% side is about 12 million, a little over 12 million. And there's a $8.5 million pre-development loan, which is kind of unusual for the county to be providing, but given the scale and scope of this project and some need on the True Ground part to start early, this is being proposed. One other thing to note is that there was an additional $1 million allocated by the county board, I don't know, earlier this year, to buy down, I think, 7 units to 7 additional units to 30% AMI, so very low income units that's captured within that AHIF request. So this is just a little quick site map that shows where CH3 is in relation to CH1 and 2, as well as 2 blocks from the Crystal City Metro Station. So it's well located to transit, and many other amenities in this area. So this is involving the reason for the amendments is to allow an early land conveyance of this parcel to True Ground. They've actually already started early site work in agreement with WHC, which is the owner currently of those parcels, but they did want to take possession or take control of the site in order to invest additional in the pre-development, which is estimated to be about a little over 14 million. The AHIF pre-development at 8.5, and then True Ground is going to put in about 6 million of their own funding. And really the impetus for this was to keep additional project costs down, because private pre-development loans from the commercial market are much more expensive and onerous, et cetera, et cetera. And the loan term will be until the construction. It will get us to construction closing, essentially, which will be at some point, probably mid 2025. So financing details, there's the AHIF loan amount. There's a significant amount of Virginia Housing, which is the state HFAs, subsidized funds being penciled, as well as significant DHCD, which is Department of Housing Community Development in Virginia, subsidized funding. So leveraging quite a bit of other subsidized funding into this. True Ground is looking to defer a significant amount of developer fee. And the interesting thing about this one, CH3, is that we underwrote and are estimating about $5 million in sales proceeds essentially as a land payment for Crystal Houses 7 and 8, as EYA develops market rate townhomes on those parcels, which would come in by perm conversion sometime in 2027. So AHIF loan terms, 43-year term coterminous with Virginia Housing Senior Debt, 1% interest rate, 0% during construction period, all pretty standard stuff that we're seeing in these deals. We got the capital stack, sources and uses, significant amount of tax credit equity generated by a significant amount of construction. And we're looking at obviously fairly large numbers here. Virginia housing loans, the AHIF sub debt, developer fee, some solar credits, and then the sales proceeds we talked about. This is a permanent financing capital stack. And then on the uses side, we have construction, soft costs, all the kind of standard stuff that's part of this at this scale, because this is 344 units at quite a significant per unit cost. So there was a number of community touch points in the process, including through the minor site plan approval process, which occurred at the beginning of this year. Housing Commission, which we were at in it looks like February, and recommended the AHIF allocation on that side, which was later allocated in time for the 9% competitive round in March. We have Housing Commission that we're sitting in right now, and the County Board in a week or so. Timeline is for the AHIF funding to go to the County Board in October. Sometime in the spring is what we're anticipating. True Ground securing, going through the tax-exempt bond process with Virginia Housing for the 4% side, and then closing on both of the 9 and 4% projects, and beginning full construction mid 2025 with completion and place in service at the end of 2027. Recommendations that we are proposing that were included in the draft board report to the county board are to allocate the AHIF, the permanent debt, approve the pre-development loan, and approve all the associated documentation amendments, including, I think this is the fourth amendment now to the land disposition and development agreement with the development group in order to facilitate this project. And that is the end. So I will turn it to our partners at True Ground. I think Danny and Haley are here to go through their presentation, and then we can take questions. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. This is Haley Norris. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. I will also try to be brief. I know it's a little bit late, and I'm going to try not to repeat anything that Chris has already shared because he went through a lot of the numbers and stuff. But good evening. I'm Haley Norris. I'm a director of real estate development at True Ground Housing Partners. As Chris said, there we go. Up until a couple of weeks ago, we were APA, Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. We recently went through a rebranding process to change our name, really so that it reflects kind of our regional approach to providing affordable housing. We're still based in Arlington. Our roots are in Arlington. Many of our homes are in Arlington, but we are working across the region on the affordable housing challenges. So this is the mission statement that we put in place last year, actually, and that has not changed. Everyone deserves a place to call home, a foundation to live their dreams. And as True Ground, we are, we're still providing the same high quality affordable housing, providing resident-centered services in all of our new buildings. So we are looking forward to continuing to do that work both here in the county and throughout the DMV. Okay, so Crystal House 3. Chris shared some of this already, so I won't go into too much detail, but he mentioned we've been here a few times already on this project. As you can tell, there are more phases coming, so it won't be the last as we go through this process over the next few years. But this is just a glimpse of the whole site again. So the Crystal House 1 and 2 buildings are there now. They're a little over 800 units. And the master plan infill redevelopment is for, it's 5 new buildings. We are here working on the first one, Crystal House 3. But of these new buildings, it's going to provide about 850 new residential units, the vast majority of which will be affordable. We'll also be providing throughout this redevelopment 2 new public parks. We'll see in a little bit that this first park here along 8th Street will be delivered shortly after Crystal House 3, which will be a great amenity for existing residents and all the residents that'll be living here in the future. So we've been working through the entitlement process on a couple of these because when they were entitled, they were all going to be market rate luxury buildings. So we've been working with county staff and with our design team to make some updates to make them meet the design standards and kind of the programming needs for our affordable buildings. So Crystal House 6 went through a minor site plan amendment in the winter of 2023. Crystal House 3 then went through a minor site plan amendment earlier this year in the spring. And along with that, we came to you all for the 9% AHIF allocation. So this is a rendering of the new building at Crystal House 3, and here's our timeline. I guess I might have been a little bit off on this date. Maybe it was February that the county board, or no, it was March that the county board approved the 9% AHIF allocation. We then submitted our 9% tax credit application and won an allocation of $3 million in competitive tax credits. We're working through the process and applying for some of our other funding at this point. As Chris mentioned, we actually have started on the early work on the site. We began that last month. It's mostly like utility relocation. There's a lot of stuff under the ground we have to move before we can start vertical construction of the building. So we're getting a jump start on that. We're here tonight and we anticipate kind of our full construction closing, vertical construction commencement in the spring, summer of next year. It's a big building, so it's got a pretty long construction period and it'll be done fourth quarter of 2027. So this is an overview of the affordability. I'm glad to dive into this more, but the whole building is 432 units. It's all affordable between 30% and 60% of the area median income. As Chris mentioned, we did add some more 30% of AMI units into the building. So I think it's 10% of the whole building is now 30% of AMI. I'll check on that, but we did add some more 30% AMI units. And it's largely family with a lot of 2 and 3 bedrooms as well. This summarizes some of the accessibility, universal design, and supportive housing features. So there's a couple different numbers on here. What I'll share out loud, I'll say for the whole building. So of the 432 units, we're going to have 22 of those set aside for Arlington County's permanent supportive housing program. One thing we're really excited about in this building is there's actually going to be some space within the building that DHS staff can use to provide services out of as they need to. So they'll be able to serve those PSH residents here on site, both for this building and then Crystal House 6 will be the next building to be developed, and that'll be affordable senior. So we're really excited that we'll have kind of that on-site presence, co-location opportunity. Across the whole building, we'll have 123 units that meet universal design guidelines, 45 UFAS units, 16 ANSI Type A units, and 18 that are for visually and hearing impaired households. I'm glad to answer any questions about the budget, but I'll skip over this one because we kind of covered this in Chris's presentation. Happy to come back. And then this last piece is about the pre-development loan that Chris talked about. And we just want to share that we're really appreciative of this opportunity to work with the county on this. It is not a typical ask. We don't usually see pre-development loans from the county or others. Part of what's driving it on this building is the size of it. It's 432 units. So the construction duration is long, and both the tax credit program and the county Amazon covenants that run with this land have some pretty tight timelines for completion. We have to be complete by the end of 2027. So in order for a building this big to meet that timeline, we really needed to start that early construction work, which is just driving more of the costs earlier than we usually see them. So that's why there's such a large pre-development lift on this project compared to other ones. Normally we would wait to start that until we're a little bit closer to closing, but we were not able to do that and still meet the timeline here. So that's a lot of what's driving that request on top of just the magnitude. So a lot of that's going towards utility work, relocation, stormwater, sanitary lines, design. And this is an image here of the park that we're going to be building. So Crystal House 3 is right here. This is 20th, which is the main entrance into the Crystal House site. So we're going to have a really beautiful park here that has a little playground space, some open space for running around and playing in, and then kind of some some benches, some more passive recreation area here. So excited to bring that to the neighborhood. I think that is it. Danny Ross, my colleague, is here with you tonight because he's on the commission. So between the two of us, we look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation from staff and from True Ground. It's going to take me a while to get used to that, but
same.
Are there any questions or feedback from commissioners?
I have a question. I was wondering, could you please define what you mean by universal design guidelines for, there was a number that you mentioned of units that were going to be of that design, and that's only recommended guidelines. It is not a standard. So what accessibility standard is this, or is going to be met in this construction?
So it's a good question. And it's Virginia Housing has actually set a standard for universal design. So it is actually a little bit more prescriptive in the state of Virginia than it is in other places. And I'd be glad to send those along. It's a lot of kind of visitability recommendations. So I'm happy to send those.
Is a standard for single family dwellings and not multifamily.
Yeah, and I'd be happy
what
to
I'm
share.
concerned is, are you going to be meeting building code requirements for type A units? Are all the units that you're talking about only going to meet the Fair Housing Act accessibility standard, which is a lower standard than the type A and type B units? So.
Yes, we will absolutely be meeting or exceeding building code for accessibility. The universal design is really in addition, above and beyond that, based on Virginia Housing's guidelines.
So it's only 22, did you say 22 units in 400?
The 22 units are permanent supportive housing. The universal design is 123.
Excuse me?
The universal design was 123 units. And then we had 45 UFAS.
But they're 400 units, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, so you're only going to meet the 2% type A units, right?
I believe that's what it is for type A.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out whether you're going to meet what standard you're going to meet. So if you could clarify maybe at some point before the...
Yes, happy to send that information as well.
Thank you, Doris. Katie?
Yeah, well, first of all, this looks really great. Very exciting. And my question was about management of the property. And I don't know too much about how APA does it, but how do you select the property management company? And, I think especially given the complaints we've been hearing about different property managers at affordable complexes.
Yeah, that's a good question. And we do use third-party management. We work with SL Nussbaum at our properties in the county. They have extensive experience with affordable communities and some, the certification requirements, the compliance components of that. And we also have a very hands-on asset management team that we work with that is in-house at True Ground, who works really closely with them to address any concerns, issues, and try to head those off early.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion on this item? Okay. Chris, can you pull up the staff recommendation slide again? I think it was the second to last slide. Because I know there are multiple parts to it and want to make sure that for the motion, we cover everything. Okay. So with discussion over, do I have a recommendation or do a motion for action on this item.
So moved.
Do you want to say what that is, Zach?
I have a motion to allocate $29,699,222 in a proposed loan to support the construction of CH3 4% LIHTC loan, approve the $8.5 million pre-development loan funding early start work, and approve the associated amendments to the underlying agreements.
Thank you. So we'd be recommending that to the county board.
I second.
Thank you. Let's do roll call vote. 1 second. Nikki is not able to make it. Elizabeth. I think her honeymoon is happening right now, so she's also not able to make it. Zach.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Margaret.
Yes.
Anika. I feel like I didn't see Anika either. Okay. Danny.
So as a True Ground employee, I have to recuse myself, but thank you.
Thank you. So abstaining. Thank you. Jason.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Joseph. Joe.
Yes.
And Katie.
Yes.
And Joe, I'm only going to count one of your votes, not the echo vote. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much to staff and True Ground for the presentation. Look forward to presentations in the future about the forthcoming aspects of the project. Go ahead, Doris.
Could I ask that maybe in the letter that there be some recommendation that when they're doing these presentations, they make clear what accessibility standards are going to be used. You know, for example, like in an elevator building, 100% of all units must meet Fair Housing Act standards, and then which, you know, how many will go beyond. And I think it's important not just for the type A units, but to know, you know, what they're going to be doing, and maybe catch something before it becomes a problem after it's built and we have to find it within 2 years, or the renter is going to have to pay for any accessibility modifications.
This Crystal House.
Joe, I think you're not on mute. If you want to go ahead and mute yourself. Sorry about that, Doris. Go ahead.
Am I on mute now?
Nope, you're still.
Well, apparently I'm not working.
I think you have to mute your telephone. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Doris.
Oh, you didn't hear me?
If you could repeat like the very last part of what you said.
I was just requesting that maybe we could put some language in the letter that indicates that how important it is in assessing a project to ensure that, for example, in this project, elevator buildings that are going to meet the Fair Housing Act standard, and that what percentage are going to be meeting the building code standard, the 2%, or, you know, if it's a 9% tax, low income housing tax credit property, then it should also be having 10% of the units that are type A. But I think, you know, if we don't know what the standard is, saying something like universal design guidelines, that's no legally enforceable standard. It concerns me, particularly since the county is spending its money.
Okay, thanks, Source. Yeah, we can certainly include language around that. Okay. Well, thank you very much for this agenda item. The next one that we have is another action item on recovery residences, the zoning ordinance amendment. So we had an information item about this last month. I invited staff to come back for an action item this month. The board is going to hear it at its meeting on the 19th. And I do believe that we have an update from staff they wanted to provide.
Hi, good evening. I'm Debbie Albert. I'm a deputy zoning administrator with CPHD Zoning Division, and I'm here with Cliff Hogan, who you saw last month and who is also the mastermind behind this amendment. I'm going to give you just a brief presentation, just a little bit of an update to, you can all hear me, right? Okay. Yep. Just a little bit of an update to what you heard last month and just kind of a brief recap. We're not going to take up too much of your time, but we've got lots of extra slides here to answer any questions that you have. So let me see if I can get this presentation. Okay. So again, just a quick summary of the proposed amendment, just a recap of what you heard last month and the background, kind of how we got here. A brief correction to some of the information that we might have shared, some new information about what our neighboring jurisdictions are doing. A recap of our community engagement and what we've heard from the board's other advisory groups and commissions, and then staff's recommendation. And then we'll just open it up for questions and see where you all want to take the conversation. So as a reminder, this is a proposed zoning ordinance amendment that would define recovery residences, and it would permit recovery residences by right in single family detached dwellings for up to 8 unrelated people, and by special exception, use permit approval by the county board for either more than 8 people or in a dwelling unit other than a detached single family dwelling. And again, as a reminder, a recovery residence is a drug and illicit drug and alcohol free residence for peer supported sober living. And it's one of the transitional housing types for people in recovery from drug and alcohol abuse. And again, as a reminder, the proposed amendment was triggered by a reasonable accommodation request from Oxford House, Inc., citing the status of persons in drug or alcohol recovery as disabled persons under the 1988 amendments to the Fair Housing Act. And this amendment and the study that staff has undertaken was triggered as a result of a zoning complaint investigation. And we are proposing this zoning ordinance amendment as a means of meeting the reasonable accommodation request, as the use was not previously or is not currently supported by our zoning ordinance. Staff is proposing that the amendment as proposed by staff is designed to provide the same access to single-family dwellings to residents in recovery from substance abuse disorders in certified recovery homes as that already allowed for residents with mental illness, intellectual or developmental disability living in licensed residential facilities. And that second piece is already mandated by state code. The recovery residence definition doesn't quite fit that definition in our zoning ordinance. The amendment is also designed to complement the services that the county provides through our Department of Human Services and the Community Services Board for persons who are challenged by mental health, developmental disabilities, and substance use disorder, recognizing that 40% of the population served last year by the Community Service Board last fiscal year I self-identified as having a substance use disorder. The amendment is also designed to be consistent with the definition of recovery residence in the Code of Virginia. And finally, the proposed amendments are designed to provide an interim step in broadening the definition of family in our zoning ordinance with a narrow scope to meet the reasonable accommodation request in the short term without presupposing the outcome of a future planned zoning study, which would look more broadly at the definition of family. I'm not sure if Cliff shared with you last month what some of our neighboring jurisdictions allow with respect to recovery residences. We've looked at our neighboring jurisdictions as well as other jurisdictions in Virginia who regulate this use. We found that there are 5 jurisdictions seen on the left side of the slide, including 3 of our neighbors in Alexandria, Falls Church, and Fairfax, who currently would already allow recovery residents as a matter of right. If this was shared last month, Fairfax County, we actually recently got an update from the Fairfax County zoning administrator, found out that they do have an informal interpretation of their zoning ordinance, which does allow that use by right, even though their ordinance currently limits unrelated people in a dwelling to no more than 4. By interpretation, they do allow up to 8 people in a recovery residence by right. Harrisonburg, Virginia, and Chesterfield County also regulate the use similar to how we do. And then some of our neighbors in Loudoun and Prince William have ordinances more similar to what we have now. Although Loudoun does have an option for a use permit for more than 5 people. And we can certainly answer more questions about this if you have them. Just an update on what we've heard from the board's other advisory groups and commissions since Cliff spoke with you last month. We've received a letter to the county board recommending the proposed amendment as proposed by staff from the Community Services Board. They also, in their letter, affirmed that recovery residences are a very important transitional step in the continuing of care for people in recovery from substance abuse, as well as the dire need for housing as people transition from treatment settings. The Planning Commission heard the proposed amendment on Monday after deferring it in September. On Monday night, they voted unanimously to support the proposed recommendation as proposed by staff. We are here at the Housing Commission with you now. And lastly, the Disabilities Advisory Commission. We weren't expecting a letter from them, but they did express support for the proposed amendment in an information item back in July. And just as a last side, staff is recommending that the county board adopt the proposed amendment as presented in the staff report. And Cliff and I are both here to answer any questions you all may have about the details or some of the follow-ups you may have had from last month. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate the updated presentation. I know we had good discussion on this item last month. But I felt like it was important, especially given the fair housing implications and also the relevance of this issue more broadly to the fair housing plan that was adopted last year by the county board that called on the county to look at expanding the current definition of family in our zoning code, that we write a letter to the county board expressing our support for this. And at least that was my sense of the commission last month, that we were supportive of this change. And my understanding also from talking to multiple fair housing organizations that if the county didn't do this, they would be violating the law. So it's kind of something that they have to do to stay in compliance with the Fair Housing Act, since a reasonable accommodation request has been made on this issue. But I think it's also important for the county to acknowledge and look at the fact that our existing zoning code is discriminatory to a number of different groups. And this is a positive step in the right direction to at least make sure for recovery residences that we're not discriminating against them on the basis of their disability. Comments, questions from other commissioners? Go ahead, Jason.
Quick question. So is this the exact same ordinance that was proposed to the county board on the 14th meeting that was deferred? Like there's been no changes, just to clarify?
Yeah, that's correct. Staff's recommendation remains the same.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Comments?
I'd like to ask, because when we discussed this at the Disability Advisory Commission, we did want to see the amendment expanded to include other groups of people with disabilities, particularly people with physical disabilities, but it could also be people with sensory disabilities who use personal assistance or other support and want to, buy a house and have a shared living arrangement so that they could share not only the rent but also share personal assistance, whether they're getting it from Medicaid or whether they're getting it because they're working and they could share some of their income, and that way that in fact they could live independently without having to worry about and have a job and without sharing. They would be able to share the expense of a personal assistant, which can run somebody anywhere from right now on the open market $25 an hour to $38 an hour, and get the coverage they need, because some people with very significant disabilities need nighttime coverage as well as daytime coverage, but they're able to work at competitive jobs and such. I'm talking about people with MS, ALS. I'm talking about people with spinal cord injuries and similar disabilities. And there are two houses like that in Arlington, which were owned by the Cheshire Foundation and were established back in 1982. But at some point, Cheshire sold out, and what happened is that that in order to stay in business, basically, the people in those houses had to go under Community Residents Inc. and declare themselves a group home, which is not what was their intention at all. And the beauty of the whole thing was that the houses were absolutely fully accessible, and a person with significant disability, could be independent there. Now, I know it's not part of this proposal, and there's a lot of support for getting this kind of a deal, but I think we need to. I would appreciate if you could at least note in your letter to the board that the Affordable Housing Master Plan called for a more open amendment to the zoning code that would allow for persons with a variety of disabilities and not just substance abuse or developmental disabilities. I didn't even realize that was in the presentation that we had last month. I thought it was only for substance abuse and addiction. So thank you for letting me say that. I really hope that you might make that point, because when we discussed it at the Disability Advisory Commission, I don't know where the note came from, but we had discussed recommending expanding it to people with other disabilities.
And thank you for that, Doris, and I appreciated your email on that earlier in response to the email I'd shared from the Equal Rights Center on their comments around the fair housing implications of this issue. And I do think, and I think you had brought up the affordable housing implications as well. And I personally am in favor of the county just lifting the cap from 4 to 8 for all folks who are unrelated. I know that's not the issue before us today, and I'm looking forward to the zoning study that's supposed to kick off next year to look at that. But yeah, I think including information about how we would support sort of expanding definitions in that zoning study would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's also, by the way, also a recommended thing in terms of the Olmsted requirement to have zoning that enables people with disabilities to live in their own homes and not have to live in a nursing home just to get personal assistance and those kinds of support. And I forgot to say that in what I wrote to you, but it's also in line with Olmsted.
Yeah, I think that was in the ERC letter that they'd shared with the Planning Commission. Thank you, Doris. Any other comments? Anything that people think should be included in a letter, assuming we do write one?
I had one question. I know last time we talked about this with Cliff. It was mentioned that there were several concerns expressed, but the nature of those concerns was unknown, or I don't know, Cliff, if you forgot about them. I'm just curious to know if those were resolved or were sort of just, it sounds like based on what Kellen's saying, that this is required for us to come into legal compliance with state code, but would love to hear more about that if there were attempts to address those issues.
You're talking about the concerns around the calls for police service.
I just recall there were calls and some neighbors had expressed issues, but I don't think there was a whole lot of detail on the nature of those concerns.
Yeah, I mean, we've I don't know if it's in the slide, but the amount of police calls, were we looked at the 6 recovery residences and then 6 mental health developmentally disabled. So this is kind of so this slide shows the comparison of the calls for service, of police reports taken, and the arrests. We feel that this is kind of comparable and expected for these 2 types of housing, for these housing types. As far as, and I think there was questions about the nature of the calls. So we were able to kind of like determine like this is kind of like the trends of the reasons for the police calls for service. Yeah, so this is kind of again, like the ones for the Oxford houses, the typical reason were what are called administrative. Those were for warrant service, for they were related to people who are on parole, either through the recovery court or the behavioral health court. And then again, for the mental health residences, the largest reason were for emergency medical or behavioral health calls that for the residents who were there. So yeah, I don't know if this is providing more.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Cliff, this is what we talked about at the beginning of this agenda item at the last meeting. And I think, Zach, from my understanding, going into that meeting, and this has been reinforced by outside conversations like before this one, is that the issues that the neighbors have brought up, or residents who are concerned about this, have really nothing to do with the merits of whether or not the county should approve this, which is like a separate thing that like legally the county kind of has to. Otherwise they're likely to get sued and be forced to do it anyways. That, and I think we had said this last month, that the county should encourage Oxford House to work with neighbors to resolve issues that occur at those properties. But that's a separate conversation from whether or not this zoning change should move forward.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Other questions, discussion on this? Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion, yes. motion to recommend approval of, let me find the slide.
It's up on the screen.
Sorry, my bad. Yes, to adopt the proposed amendment as presented in the staff report of defining recovery residences, permitting recovery residences, and modifying the residential use classification.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. And let's do a roll call vote. Commissioner Lennick.
Yes.
I vote yes. Commissioner McIlvray.
Yes.
Commissioner Ross.
Sorry, yes.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Yes.
Commissioner Surface.
Yes.
Commissioner Ventrone.
Yes.
Commissioner Wenger.
Yes.
And I don't think I missed anyone, right? Great. Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, staff, for the presentation and coming back to us, 2 months in a row. The next item on our agenda is an information item.
Thank you.
And that is building repositioning and adaptive reuse policy and zoning ordinance amendments, which I think is about office building conversions to residential. So looking forward to this.
Great, thank you very much. Can you guys see the slides on the screen now?
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much for having us. I am Mark McCauley with Arlington Economic Development. I'm joined here by Jill Hunger, Assistant Director of CPHD. We are the co-leads on the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative, and specifically in this case on the efforts to look at obsolete office supply in the county and policies and tools to repurpose those. So for those of you not familiar with the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative, this is a multi-year initiative by the county manager, supported by the county board, to look at ways that the county can react, adapt to rapidly changing economic conditions, and at the end of the day, remove regulatory barriers to allow for market-based solutions to a wide variety of challenges, including, in most pertinent tonight's topic, the challenges in the office market. This particular item even goes a little further and focuses on the supply aspect, and particularly the presence of a large supply of obsolete office supply, or in other terms, office buildings that are non-competitive for leasing as office space, even despite sort of decreased rents, aren't able to maintain occupancy, and are and as biggest concern for the county is are seeing declining values that affect our tax base. So there are really three elements to this process, two of which are going in front of the county board in November. One is a county board policy that will look at a wide variety of tools with a focus on adaptive reuse. This will also establish the justification for the impact, looking at the office market trends, but more particularly the impacts on the county of obsolete office supply, both in terms of tax revenues and quality of life and placemaking, as well as the threat of inaction relative to challenges becoming crisis if left unattended. As I said, the policy will then establish adaptive reuse, or which is often called in other communities conversions, where a office building is repurposed as an alternative use, as a first step to look at from both the policy and implementation standpoint. And then, but it'll also address other policy tools relative to building repositioning, which is reinvesting in office buildings to make them more competitive, a wide spectrum of redevelopment for office buildings, from redevelopment processes that sort of add stories or that tear down a superstructure but maintain parking, to the more typical redevelopment that we see in the county, which is full-scale redevelopment. And then lastly, we'll look at future studies for incentives. So these last three are really teeing up future study. So no definitive policy guidance other than to tee up future studies. The primary focus, however, has been on regulatory processes, with financial incentives being a later study for next year. Second is the zoning ordinance amendment, and if you have any questions, Jill can go over these, but I'll try to cover them very quickly tonight, which will provide a new process for an adaptive reuse amendment with criteria and limitations. We'll talk about the applicability of affordable housing requirements, as well as method for achieving minimal density, and we'll talk about how building form may change with some of these projects, but minimally relative to redevelopment. And then finally, something that doesn't necessarily go in front of the board, but is important from a contextual standpoint, and certainly for implementation, is any changes to administrative regulations or guidelines, looking at what things need to be submitted to the county to begin review, what are the process for both the staff review and community engagement or community review, what is the timing of that process, and then what are the standard site plan conditions, as well as guidelines that are used to review applications. So the broad policy, sort of the overarching policy is that, and I won't read this verbatim, you guys have it. I should also mention that I'm going to go through some of this quickly. A lot more material was provided, discussion was provided at the LRPC on September 24th, I believe. That was recorded, as well as a lunch and learn we did back in July. And I'll talk about some other future engagements we have in the future. But from a broad overarching standpoint, this policy looks at bold public policy and regulatory intervention into the market. We're talking about a sense of urgency to respond to the significant negative impacts on the county, and that we establish the adaptive the repurposing of obsolete office buildings in whatever form as a public priority, alongside other public priorities such as green building, affordable housing, community facilities, and transportation. And that, once again, the focus of transforming the supply of existing obsolete office buildings. This is not to say that the office market doesn't have healthy components. It certainly does, but that the obsolete office supply is a drag on the market. So when we say adaptive reuse, how are we defining that? First, the change in principal use from office to other use. The reason why we are addressing this as a first step with a new process is because under the current ordinance, the change in principal use of more than 5% would be considered a major site plan amendment, which we feel is an overly cumbersome process for essentially a conversion of a building that is mostly interior fit out and conversion with relatively little change to building exterior, the exterior site. We do see some exceptions that we could potentially allow as part of this process, such as ground floor bump outs, rooftops, terraces, mezzanines, balconies, facade refreshes, or even full-scale facade replacements, landscaping, refreshing, and replantings, addition of outdoor amenities, as long as it doesn't drastically reduce any existing amenity base. And then one that we're happy to talk about, but as we've talked about at length in other settings, is whether unrequired parking in a conversion can be converted to GFA for other uses. An important point here is this process is not meant to allow for the altering of previously committed community benefits. So if there's a park next to a building, this is not a process through which the size, the nature of that park would be changed. That could go through the separate process of a major site plan amendment if that was the desire of the property owner. So we're looking at providing a streamlined approach with shortened review time, limit the upfront costs, both from a fee structure for application, but more importantly, for the amount of materials that a developer has to provide going into and through a process that adds up into millions of dollars, and then apply the site plan standards in their proper context, that not a lot is changing for these buildings. And so therefore, we really want to focus on the elements of change, and unlike a full redevelopment where there's much more moving parts, much more changes, much more details to go over, there's not as much for these types of projects. So again, the relationship to the current process, this will be a new process in the Arlington County zoning ordinance. We are coordinating it with additional work being done, looking at, in general, major, minor, and administrative processes and definitions. And the timing is really to aim for the 120, 150 day or less. We hope less to go from approval to get to approval from submission to the county. That obviously is dependent upon the complexity of the project and as well as the quality of the submission, as well as other factors such as resources available to the county. But we're looking to really streamline this. This would be significantly less than the 9 to 12 months plus typically associated with a major site plan amendment. Method of review, this will still result in a county board action. We did look at administrative pathways, but given the nature of how site plans are approved, that a totally administrative path would be neither efficient nor probably legal in terms of changing major elements of an approved site plan. So we're still going to end with the county board, and we are looking with and talking with the Planning Commission and other commissions, as well as including yours, about the role of the commissions during this review path, looking to streamline that process, not to remove altogether the review by commissions in some sense is this, but to really streamline that in an effective way. And then the criteria and limitations, through which we'll apply the zoning ordinance and projects, apply the zoning ordinance to projects that are proposed to the county. We really mean trying to be flexible but focused. One, for instance, is that we're only going to look at this stage at approved and constructed site plan projects, so no by right. We may study that next year, but that is a little more complicated relative to how by right projects were approved. So we're looking at approved site plan. Obviously, requires that the principal use is office for the building and that a significant percentage of the office is being changed. We looked at other things like vacancy or age, which were not really considered sort of all that viable or applicable, given what we saw throughout the region and other jurisdictions, but also our own experience. And really, we just want to focus on the market, deciding which buildings may be good candidates. And again, no changes to existing community benefits. So I teased some of the density allowances. Again, happy to answer questions, but won't go over this in great detail given the interest of time this evening. But looking at different types of allowances and site plan standards, looking at different types of densities that would be considered and the standards that would be applied. These aren't different standards. They will just be a different context of standards, perhaps a different level of standards relative to adaptive reuse than maybe a full redevelopment that has more flexibility in accommodating new building condition. And then the draft policy looks at so that we have an October 1st public version. You'll see this has significantly changed given continued feedback internally and externally. But the bottom line is affordable housing payments or units or really any other typical community benefits will not be a source of impact mitigation for adaptive reuse projects, given the minimal change in form of the building and the desire to streamline the process. We will not be applying the ADU ordinance because these will stay at the same density roughly. And if there is minimal density increases, there's a method in the zoning ordinance proposal that will allow for the allowance of that additional density per the policy and per the ordinance. Obviously, affordable housing standards could be incorporated if additional resources were brought to bear, so it doesn't prohibit someone coming forward with an affordable housing project or a component of affordable housing within these projects. As you look to the right, what's in the actual ordinance, you'll see how that's put in writing, with the exception of density as set forth in 15.59. So that's the new tool we have through which we achieve density, albeit minimal for these projects, but not for, but adaptive reuse amendments are excluded. You'll see that the highlighted portion already exists in the ordinance today, where rehabilitation or renovation projects are not applicable. And we think these projects are much more akin to that than full-scale redevelopment. So lastly, what do we look to put some highlight in this and to sort of allow for any discussion? The first is that the policy will set up from the county board that the removal, repurposing of obsolete office buildings is a public priority. This is an important term that provides the board the ability to modify things in the zoning ordinance, as well as continuing to reflect on different processes to be able to achieve this priority. It'll look to solve, obviously, tax revenue challenges, as well as placemaking and quality of life impacts that are hindered by a large presence of obsolete office space. We definitely are looking for a sense of urgency. Challenges become crises very quickly. and we want to create market momentum in the opposite, where we're starting to repurpose and recapture asset value through this process for declining office assets. That conversions are in this, or we call adaptive reuse, have different economics than redevelopment. Some would consider them cheaper, though I think in many ways they are a little more risky. There are a lot of more unknowns and not particularly cheaper, although you can do things like maintain parking. But more importantly, not because you're not changing heights or adding additions, there's no additional density through which to provide value. And again, the market is still figuring these projects out, and therefore there's market risk in capital sourcing. Is still not I would say a challenge, but it's certainly something that is still a niche of how projects are financed in the real estate space. In terms of housing, while we talked about that this will not be a source of what we think are probably typically net new affordable housing units from non-residential to residential projects, we do think that when a project does go to residential, it does support some unique housing production. Certainly price points typically are below what would be typical luxury new market rate development. And there are often some unique unit type and designs that are unique, that are different sizes, that allow for more of a live-work concept, things like that. I will also say that building amenities can be much more different, often much enhanced to new construction because of a lot of the available space. And I'll also end by sort of saying, while a lot of people talk about the office to resi opportunity, that we're seeing as much office to hospitality, but obviously housing is obviously one of those uses that may be is certainly considered when developers looking at the adaptive reuse of an office building. So finally, schedule. This is a long list, but you'll see we're about halfway down with the Housing Commission. We've spent the Economic Development Commission earlier this week. The draft policy in Arlington County zoning ordinance text was posted October 1st on the CMRI website. We went to the Planning Commission, the Long Range Planning Committee of the Planning Commission on September 24th. We went to this was request to advertise on the County Board September hearing. Prior to that, we had a lunch and learn. So looking forward, we have a joint meeting of the Planning Commission's LRPC and Zoning Committee on October 15th, so next Tuesday. We have a lunch and learn, a second lunch and learn from 12 to 1 on October 17th. We are meeting with C2E2 and the Transportation Commission later that month, and then we get to the November Planning Commission and County Board hearing. So sorry for moving so fast, but I understand it's late, and so I want to leave enough time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Do you have an estimate on how many properties would be good candidates for this?
Yeah, we've done a fair amount of analysis. Now, it's hard to say, owner motivation, but one of the big factors tends to be not only the owner motivation, but what the current building has relative to things like floor plates and ceiling heights. Ceiling heights being most notable for things because light and air become so important for things like residential uses. And we think roughly a dozen are potentially good candidates. We know of 3 to 4 that we're having active conversations with right now of projects that we know of where developers waiting for this process to play out before they can apply. So what we say is probably going to be over a period of years, a limited number of applications, but high impact, meaning this could still mean millions of square feet of office space taken off the market that's not competitive, and then thousands of rooms, units, other types of uses that may go into these buildings that could have significant positive impact on those markets. So yeah, we're quoting about a dozen are good candidates, but again, that could ebb and flow over time.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. I think I got it fixed. We already had one good in Crystal City or National Landing. There was one successful building that was converted. And my question is, how was that done without these policies, or did you learn from that and that's why we're developing these policies?
Yeah, so there's actually two, depending on how far back you go in Crystal City. There's the most recent one was 7 or 8 years ago, and that was the what we used to call the We Work We Live building, where the vast majority of the building was turned into micro unit residential with still some co-working space on the top 2 floors. um, that was met that as you said was sort of went through a standard process for change of use, but did not apply new community benefits to it. I will say that project has gone through some fits and starts. A lot of it due to its original namesake being a bit of a challenge, and the concept being very we think important and interesting and something that we should see more of in the county, but certainly very much a niche market in terms of a true micro unit, shared amenity space type concept. The other project that has been very successful, which was happened years before that, is 220 20th, where Vornado at the time owned the building, and it was an old BRAC building, and they took down this right down to the core. They added 6 stories to the top, and it's been a high productive, very productive market rate apartment for the past 15 years. When having done sort of continued discussions with the developer at the time of that property, as we were looking to get data even way back when, we understood that that was a very tight project financially, and that the inclusion of parking and not having to significantly pay for community benefits was part of it, although they did pay for community benefits with additional stories. The idea of adding additional stories to adaptive reuse is another process we'll look at into next year in terms of what the community benefit expectations would be. So that would not qualify for what we're calling adaptive reuse right now. That would still stick to redevelopment under the current process. We are looking at whether a different way of thinking about community benefits for additional density for those projects would be appropriate, but that's not something all the board's going to guide in the policy as of today. That's a future study for next year.
Okay. My other question is on the draft housing policy. I don't understand the first paragraph where it talks about affordable housing payments of units will not be a source of impact mitigation for adaptive reuse. What does that mean? I know someone that is looking at a building now and wants to convert it to housing and have it be open to federal housing vouchers or Arlington rental payments. Is that allowable under this plan?
Certainly, the operations of the building wouldn't preclude that, and that's really a Prairie Mobile Ward salad that only means that our zoning ordinance essentially provides density, or provides approvals and/or typically density by the concept of impact mitigation. So that can be rewarded to be clearer, but that's really our county attorneys often say, we don't give density. Folks earn density through mitigating impacts, and affordable housing is one of the ways they mitigate impacts for new development.
Okay, well, you may want to clarify because reading it looks like it's prohibiting any kind of vouchers.
Yes, no, okay, absolutely, and that is a very good point. Yep.
So my understanding from the presentation is that this would not result in a new community benefits negotiation process, because it would just stick with what had previously been negotiated when the building was first developed. And that also wouldn't trigger the affordable housing ordinance. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Is there a way for the county to at least reserve the option for itself to potentially sort of purchase affordable units in the property? Or, for the county to use AHIF or some other means to pay for, hey, we want 10 affordable units in this development, and have that be part of the process where the developer can't say no to that, or, but still the money for that is not coming from the developer, it's coming from the county?
Yeah, I think I'll answer the first part and then kind of and then the second part. I think there's always an opportunity for someone to come forward with a project that has a request for affordable housing through this process and then to seek gap financing from the county. We have not discussed, and it probably will not be part of this policy per November, but it's a good question that I think we can raise, which is, can we require some sort of what you're essentially saying, right of first refusal? that has not been discussed, and I think we probably want to test that in the market first to see with the first couple what that does. But certainly for the first one, if someone comes and says, I would like to do an affordable mix in the building and go through the typical NOFA process, and for my housing colleagues, they can, obviously you're very familiar with that, there would be nothing precluding this land use action from someone going to for an AHIF loan or for other federal or state resources.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know as you're structuring what this new process is, if there's a way to add, as you said, essentially the right of first refusal. The county could say, hey, yes, you get to go through the streamlined process, but we also reserve the right to essentially purchase affordable units. They wouldn't necessarily be owned by the county. I mean, there's all that, but the county could say, hey, if we pay $3.5 million, we want 15 affordable units in this property for the next like 50 years or something.
Yeah, we can look at language that can tee that up. Again, I think one of the challenges that we're trying to solve is sort of quickly is getting to the market rapidly with these changes. And that obviously would require, I think, a more significant discussion, but we'll definitely write it down as a comment. But thank you for the comment. So
yeah, no, appreciate the time sensitivity on that. Also just weighing the fact that we're continually behind on meeting our affordable housing goals. So any way that we can look at trying to meet that, which is different than what we're doing today because we're not meeting it today, I think is important for the county to consider.
Sure. Absolutely.
Other questions, comments? Jason.
Yeah, so the question about, it's going to be faster than the existing process, but not necessarily an administrative process. There's still going to be a vote by the county board. Is there any targets for how much time savings that this process is going to be, and how many like the number of meetings that there's going to be, and what other measures are there going to be so that the percent, when one of these buildings puts a site plan or a minor or whatever this new process, the plan in place, what's the percentage like increase that it's going to follow through at the time that it's supposed to be versus the existing process where there's obviously sometimes many delays that can go months and months and months because it goes through the commission or the site planning process where a commission will say we don't want like this or the community demands and like too much like how is that getting formulated, I guess, right now? Like, is there like some targets like to go between, again, the by right process and then the current process of the site plan review?
Yeah, I'll even extend it since this is a new process. We're trying not to equate it directly to any of the existing processes, but they are guardrails, right? So right now, a minor site plan amendment, which wouldn't fall under this because the change of use and other things, but minor site plan amendments, which are typically, eye of the beholder, but minor changes to buildings, often with conditions, don't go to the planning commission or the SPRC or the planning commission and go directly to the board, right? And then major go to the planning commission and the county board. The SPRC is, as we always remind, is really a commission-led process. So staff works with the commission to sort of answer that very question that you just asked, which is what is the appropriate desire to have SPRC meetings, but staff doesn't schedule those. We work with the planning commission to schedule them. We obviously support their process, but we do not call those meetings. So I'll say tune in on Tuesday because we had that discussion on our July LRPC meeting and to tee it up, and that will be another significant topic of discussion with the subcommittees, the LRPC and ZOCO, which is where does the role of SPRC play in versus PC? And we want it to be collaborative. We can't tell PC not to have meetings. They can't tell staff not to go to the board. But obviously it works best when both are aligned. So that's the goal. And I think the sort of 3-month, 120-day, 3-month sort of goal doesn't preclude necessarily going to a subcommittee meeting. It would just have to be very efficient in how that's sort of calendared. because you mentioned a lot of the challenges. One of the biggest ones tends to be just calendars, right? That you get in the queue, but then the first open slot may not be for a month and a half, and everyone's just waiting around. So that isn't always a problem, but sometimes it is.
Yeah, thank you. My just comment is just that, I know that this is, I think, a great process. Is that what I hope it plays out, of course, in these meetings is not that, there's a defined process and then the scope kind of increases. And like by the time, this is approved in November, it's like it could, it's closer to the existing process than an actual new process. And that could cause some buildings to delay or not come in, these handful of buildings. So that's just my thought.
We've gotten very good response from the planning commission so far. So we are definitely aligned with you from a staff perspective of this has to be different enough to make a difference, right? If it starts to feel like the same process, then we spent a lot of time this summer putting this together, and then it's not really gonna, if it's a matter of literally a week or a day, it's not gonna matter. It has to be significant time savings.
Other questions from folks?
Kellen, I have one. I can't raise my hand on Teams for whatever reason,
Go
so
ahead.
I'm not trying to be rude. Mark, thank you for the presentation. I just want to foot stomp what Kellen said about the urgency of adding additional both market rate and affordable housing stock. In addition to exploring the option of having, an AHF loan pay for part of the adaptive reuse costs, I also just want to express my support for exploring other options, financial incentives for developers to convert to commercial buildings to housing as opposed to another use. I don't know what the financial realities of that would be, but I think it's important to look at, just given the importance of adding additional housing.
Yep. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much for the presentation, Mark. Looking forward to seeing how this turns out and shapes up. Appreciate the county paying attention to this incredibly important issue. And just one point of clarification that I was curious, multifamily residential buildings, when we talk about like residential versus commercial taxes, are those considered commercial or residential?
Commercial.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you go back to the LRPC where we had more slides on it, we pulled out office as a component of commercial. Right now, commercial, we used to say we're a 50-50 community. We're now 46, 54, 45, 55 commercial to residential, but the commercial apartments have really been the bulwark for the past 10 years, 10, 20 years, supporting that still relatively good balance. So yes, anything that's rented and has income is commercial. Anything that is owner occupied is considered residential.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Our next item on the agenda is development updates. Alex?
Yes, good evening, everyone. So there are no development updates from staff today, except for to re-mention the meetings that we have on the schedule coming up. I sent out notices, but the Hotel Pentagon SPRC and the Melwood SPRC, we're looking for reps for both of those. Unfortunately, we don't have exact dates yet on those meetings, I don't believe, so I'll pass them along as we do, but no development updates tonight other than just there are SPRC opportunities out there for those interested.
And Alex, I'm interested in, both potentially, but it just depends on what date they are and if I can make that. So difficult to commit in advance.
Yeah, I'll keep the commission updated on when those dates are actually selected.
Appreciate that. And I think I'm the default person anyway, so right, like I think my name shows up on the roster, whether it just as long as we don't provide a different name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Alex. Joe, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'd be interested in either one of those also if you need help.
Great. Maybe we can divide and conquer. Okay. So for subcommittee and liaison reports, I know we had the homeownership study presentation, but happy to get any update or thoughts from you, Karen.
I would urge anybody who's interested to look at the slides on the website. I know we just kind of quickly went through some stuff because there really is some really good information if you're into that kind of thing. So yeah, the staff has done an incredible job of putting all that together. I don't know what else to say. It's
Karen,
interesting for me. It's interesting for me, but I understand people's eyes sort of glaze over with all these different programs and income guidelines. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to maybe offline answer questions.
Do you know how long the subcommittee, is it going to meet anymore, or is it basically done at this point?
That's a good question. I can find out.
Okay.
They're actually, what they've said is that they're going to continue to gather feedback from people just because it's sort of ending. They're still happy to get feedback because this whole HUD Pro application, if we get approved for that, there can still be changes made to that, even though, they have certain stuff they put in the application. So it's still open.
Okay. Yeah, and I think there's some surveys out right now as well for the homeownership study. Is that correct? I think, is the grant one still open?
It's open till tomorrow at midnight. Yes.
Okay. And is there any other homeownership study? Okay. Cool. Well, thank you, Karen. Appreciate your hard work there. Any update on SIDSAC, Margaret? You are muted.
No, just we're in the throngs of presentations and application review.
Great. Anything from C2E2?
Yeah, so the Green Building Incentive Policy is open for public comment. I believe either now or on the 15th through November 15th. And I sent out there was a update meeting about it. But we are also hoping to have a presentation to the commission about it in December. Alex, if that still works.
Yep, that sounds good. I have that penciled in on the agenda for December.
Amazing, thank you. And the county is probably going to vote on it at the end of the year or early next year.
Great. Okay. I think that is it for our agenda tonight. Appreciate everyone hanging in there and missing the Northern Lights tonight, which it's frustrating to see that apparently they are visible in Arlington, or at least were. But we were here doing important work. So
check Facebook. You'll see them on Facebook.
Yes, there you go. So thank you all. But I think meeting adjourned. Have a good night.
At all.
Yeah.